Hello, Playdate. Thank you for joining us on this episode 1. My name is Don,
My name is Nick.
and we have a special guest on our inaugural episode. With us today is Ryan Claytor,
My name is Ryan Claytor.
and we are just we're just fans of Playdate. So we wanted to talk about the seasonal games, and we want to talk about some of our favorite indies. We are longtime podcast. All of us are longtime podcasters, actually. I've done a lot of solo shows, but I also did the Pinball podcast for several years and just wrapped up doing Gaming on 10 with Nick. And Nick, what gaming background do you have?
I make games, pinball games primarily, but I also am a longtime podcaster. I did For Amusement Only, the EM and Bingo Pinball podcast, which is in the running, at least for the longest podcast name. That is still technically active. We record about once a year now. So that might pick up with the conclusion of Gaming on 10. But so for the past 3 years, I think Don and I have done a weekly podcast, and we wanted to transition to something new and talk about our new favorite handheld in the Playdate. And
Speaking of handhelds,
yes,
our special guest has some background with handhelds and podcasting. Ryan, why don't you tell us about that?
Sure. Hi, my name is Ryan Claytor, and believe it or not, I have done some podcasts before. I did a limited run series called Game and Cast Podcast, and on there I talked about dedicated handheld retro games. So pretty much between the mid to late 70s to about mid 80s, where handheld games were dedicated. There was no cartridges to input and output. And so I did eight episodes of that, where I interviewed different folks within that community and also reviewed a number of those games. And I've also done a number of podcasts like the Michigan State University Comic Art and Graphic Novel podcast, where I teach. I also have a Patreon, and I only mention that because I do a Patreon podcast there. And I'm about to publish my 11th episode in a couple weeks here. So I've done a number of podcasting things, and also was on radio when I was in college. So lots of audio things.
Lots of gaming and audio background from all of us. Lots of handheld gaming too, and then we're just excited about this little yellow console.
Yeah, glad to be on the ground floor here.
Well, the reason Ryan is here is not because of his extensive gaming and handheld gaming and podcasting background, but rather his very exciting high scores on Whitewater Wipeout.
We're leading with that, huh?
We're leading with Whitewater Wipeout. So this week we're going to discuss the first 2 games in the Season 1, Week 1 bundle, I guess? Delivery service. So we're going to start with Whitewater Wipeout. And Ryan, what is your global score right now? Your top global score?
It's 350 something thousand. It was 35th on the leaderboard for a minute, and I think I got bumped down a couple. I just checked today; it was like 37th, something like that. So I can still say I'm in the top 40. We'll see what I can do to inch up a little bit, beat all those 13-year-olds out there.
That is amazing. So Whitewater Wipeout is by Chuhai Labs. Are you guys familiar with the other games that Chuhai has made?
I'm not.
So I actually own one of their other games, a game called Carve Snowboarding, which is on the Oculus Quest. It's a pretty simple to play snowboarding game. You put your arms in front of you and behind you, and that's sort of where you would balance on the snowboard, and you go along a snowy hill, and then you move your arms out to balance yourself, and you collect stuff as you go down. And
is it as addictive as Whitewater Wipeout?
It's very, very different than Whitewater Wipeout. Just real quick, they have a game called Halloween Forever on the Switch. They have a game called Tinker Trains coming soon. And then Nick at least has probably heard of Curse to Golf. I think that was on a Nintendo Direct. It is a golfing roguelike. It looks similar to maybe like a Golf Blitz, where there's different power-ups you do with a side-scrolling or 2D golf game, but if you don't sink the ball, your ghost gets sucked back into purgatory and you have to start over. So, and you upgrade your cards and whatnot in roguelike fashion to try and stop being cursed to golf over and over. So I can't wait to play that. It's what's going on this year.
Golf with consequences.
Yes. But we're not talking about the other Chuhai games. We're talking about Whitewater Wipeout. So Ryan really took this one. Nick, what are your initial thoughts about Whitewater Wipeout? I'll start with you maybe because we're
can't wait to hear this.
The rookies. Yeah.
Well, I was excited to try this game because it, at first glance, reminded me of like TNC Surf Designs and there's another California Games. There's definitely some DNA that's from those older surfing mini games in those two different collections. So I thought it was an interesting concept for the Playdate. However, my high score falls woefully short of Ryan's and woefully short of your own, Don. So I don't think I quite grasp the mechanics as well as either of you. How about you, Don?
I feel like you and I are probably in the same ballpark. I feel like you got to be right behind me. I feel like I looked into my 3,000 point scores. Yeah, I actually listened to the first episode or the first two episodes of the Playdate podcast, the official Panic Playdate podcast. And the second episode is about Whitewater Wipeout. They interviewed the devs and they mentioned how it is an homage to California games. But what was the TNC game you mentioned?
TNC Surf Designs. It was an NES game.
That's the one I played on NES back in the day. So this is the one I remember or it being inspired by. It came up in my mind. And I liked that it used the crank right away, so I got to mess around with that. This is the one out of the box where you're really feeling the crank. I think it only uses the crank, right? Besides menu controls, going back and forth.
There are some other play mechanics that it tells you to do. If you pay attention to the tips at the end, it gives you a number of instructions, and one of them is to press the left and right direction pad in order to spin faster. I press it, but I've not noticed it spin faster or slower, to be honest with you. And then it also, I just saw today after playing for my 1,000th time, it said to press up on the directional pad to get better air or something like that. I found it difficult to hold down the up button and also really give that crank a good crank. It started falling out of my hand. So I don't know if I have not done it right yet. Maybe if I continue doing that, I'll be able to hit those quintuples. Right now I max out at the quads.
Quad sounds unreachable. Totally unreachable.
I got a triple once.
I'm happy to chat strategy whenever you guys are ready.
Yeah, we'll do that here in a sec. I did notice Ryan had a really good tip where basically for those who haven't watched video, I'll put a link in the show notes to a YouTube video. But all you're doing is aiming the surfboard down a wave, and then you use the crank to turn the surfboard, and you go back up the wave and try and ramp off and up and down, up and down. Just get more air, and when you're in the air, you turn the crank to spin. So Ryan had noted something that I did not notice, where the orientation of the crank is basically the orientation of the board. So when the crank is down, your board is nose down. When the crank is up. But Ryan, one time when I was playing, the crank was opposite.
Same for me, actually.
So when that happens, you need to reset the crank. So at the end of the game, put the crank back in the Playdate, and then it will reset itself, and then start another game, and then it understands, okay, the crank is here. But yeah, I agree. That's happened to me before, but had to do a little hard crank reset.
There's a home position.
Yeah, you know how you can stuff it inside the Playdate, right?
Yeah, I don't stuff it in there very often. I guess I don't carry it in my pocket very often.
I just traveled with it today. My son had a doctor's appointment, so I jammed it in my pocket, and it was really helpful to have it, staged in place and knowing that it wasn't going to flop around all over the place. It's a really cool design.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I did notice one other tip when you were talking about the up and down. I'm not really sure how to gain speed. It tells you to go up to gain speed. I just notice eventually I gain speed. I don't know how to immediately gain speed, but as far as the comboing thing, it seems like if I hit the top of the wave and then immediately try and jump again, like to skip off the top of the wave, that seems to be a way to combo, but I don't have a good rhythm to it. And it feels like maybe there's a rhythm you want to meet.
Sure. So that's another tip that it tells you. Maybe after your 550th play, it'll say, move your surfer up and down the wave. So sort of ride that wave up and down and up and down. And you start gaining speed like that. And then you can up and down, up and down, up and down, whoosh up the wave. And then you really rock it up into the air. The other thing that really helps you get speed, but also maintain speed is how you land your surfboard back into the wave. So the more like parallel your board is to the top of the wave, the more you just kind of like clunk down on top of the wave. But the more perpendicular your board is to the top of the wave, the more you just like whoosh back down into the wave. And then you can carry that momentum back up into the next, whatever you happen to be doing, either riding the wave or shooting off the top of the wave or some combination thereof.
So is there like a timer between combos then? Like it gives you a second?
No, it's combos are present as long as you keep hitting double 360s or more. So if you hit a double 360 and then you're just like riding the wave up and down, up and down, up and down, but not leaving the wave, the combo is still going to stay there. It never leaves. The only time the combo leaves is if you do not do at least a double 360. So if you do a single 360 or just like, shoot the board up and then do what would that be? A 180, I guess, not do a spin, then it takes your combo away and you have to build it back up again.
Well, a 180 you would bail, I think, right?
Yeah.
So a 180, if you imagine your nose going up in the air and then you turn half a circle and come down and meet the wave.
Oh, that's true. Okay.
Yeah.
Is what I'm imagining.
Yeah. A zero would be
backwards
straight
up the wave. That's
You know what?
You don't go backwards up the wave? That seems to be what I'm capable of doing.
Nick is winding backwards to try and make the wave go down.
I've actually started trying to experiment with that. I'm so used to cranking the crank in one particular direction that I'm like, I wonder if you can do it like, I guess that would be counterclockwise. And you actually can. It's a strange sensation for me. I just started experimenting with it, and I don't think that it has any bearing on score. But I can't swear to that yet. I haven't played with it too awfully much.
We need to do a listener poll on if you're a clockwise or a counterclockwise cranker. I'm goofy, or I go both ways. I've caught myself going either way, depending on the game.
You like red wine and white wine and rosé. Is that right?
I don't like any of that stuff, but yeah. A Coke and a Pepsi guy, I guess. I don't know.
I guess I'm the only Schitt's Creek fan here.
I've got a question for you all. Are either of you left-handed?
I am not.
I'm correct-handed.
Okay. I'm just curious what a left-handed user might think of the crank, because it's very heavily weighted towards a right-hander's orientation.
Big time. Yeah.
Well, next week there's a game that uses the crank a lot in week 2, which we'll talk about next week. And I saw someone would turn the device with the crank down, and they would turn it like a coffee grinder.
Okay.
I didn't ask that person if they're left-handed, but that would be a solution, I guess.
Yeah.
So does that mean the screen would be like rotated 90 degrees sideways?
Yes.
Interesting.
With the controls off to the left. But that's a good point, Nick. There isn't really a way to swap this one. There's no hole on the left side to pop it out. So
I wonder if lefties had a difficult time with all the traditional controllers like Game Boy, Nintendo, Sega Genesis, whatever.
I've heard that over the years. Yeah.
My wife and daughter are both left-handed. I'll have to have them try this out. They haven't seemed too interested in this. I know your son, Ryan, is also an expert surfer, but
he's really taken to it. Yeah. He had a very similar experience to me when I started, which was how in the world does this work? Like I felt like Nick for a lesser period of time, but it really took a concerted amount of effort to understand the mechanics of that crank and how they affected the board. And like you said, Don, there's a direct correlation of crank down, crank up, nose up. But where I really got lost in that was the aerials when you start spinning. And then I'm like, oh God, where am I? When do I stop? And then it was really strange trying to get it back to home or down position when I was ready to land, and I would start screwing up landings a lot of the times until I started figuring out, oh, okay, watch the surfboard go up, and then as it crests and starts coming back down, pull your crank back down to home or down position, and then it gives your surfboard the allotted time to like spin back around to nose down and then land things appropriately. So that was another thing I started figuring out eventually.
We need to get Ryan on the wiki here. Have him put some pro tips. The wiki's pretty thin. I really think like that one tip means everything. Really bringing that time to bring the crank down when you're up in the air cresting. I still hit the bottom of the surf a lot, like the bottom of the screen, and then it like calls you pee boy or whatever, and you lose a life. I don't know. It always has a lot of different call outs for you being bad and stuff.
I've noticed
awesome.
I discovered a bunch more today. I think maybe as you get further, it unlocks new insults.
Did you actually have a pee boy call out? I've never seen that.
So. I don't know if it was pee boy. There was
going to say
that was very funny.
I've had all sorts of radly disparaging comments said to me, but pee boy was not one of them.
I don't know. I didn't write them down. Bad week one prep work, I guess.
So Don, you haven't played California games?
I played it a little bit at friends' houses and whatnot growing up, but I didn't have a lot of connection with that game.
Experience with that. How about you, Ryan?
I feel like I played some TNC surf design back in the day, but it wasn't enough of a staple of mine to remember it. I'd have to look it up. I only remember it because there was a TNC surf design shop in my local town. So you're like, whoa, man, it's on the Nintendo.
Gotcha. Well, California Games was ported. It's one of those computer games that was ported to like everything. So it was Commodore 64 and PCs and the NES and a variety of other systems as well. So it's interesting. And I was just curious if any of the mechanics were shared in any way, or scoring or anything with Whitewater Wipeout. I would have to look deeper and play California games again to know, but I'd be very interested to know how much of an influence that game was.
I was thinking the same thing. I was really relying on your photographic memory, Nick, to see what sort of connections there might have been to either of those games. I don't remember them well enough. Again, I'd have to look them up and have not done so. I didn't realize they were based so heavily off those games.
A lot of the pixel graphic games that are popular now serve like that, or deliver that nostalgia of like, oh, this is like this game that I grew up with. But then when you go back to those games, it's like, oh, this is nothing like this modern game,
right?
That is an homage to this classic game. And this could be a possibility where this is a better or more serviceable version of surfing than California Games was.
I think this is, if memory serves, and it has been a long time, but I think this is a much more simplified version where the mechanics are not nearly as complex or inscrutable as they were in California Games. So one of the things that I really like about the games that have released so far here in this week one are the easy pickup and play mechanics, and Whitewater Wipeout, I think, is a great example of something that you can just pop in, play a couple rounds, lose really badly over and over again, if you're me, and then put it down in frustration and pick it back up, for another 5-minute session sometime later.
Come on, Nick, you got to read my tip sheet.
Yeah,
I have faith in you.
One thing that was also difficult with this game is that we're all three of us have a big pinball background, and both Whitewater and Wipeout are both pinball machines. So remembering the title of this game was very difficult all week long.
Oh, I'm glad it wasn't just me. I kept having to glance down at my Playdate to make sure I was saying the right thing.
I kept wanting to call it other things, but it is a good name, probably without those points of reference.
Nice
I guess
alliteration.
real quick, I want to just mention how much I like the title screen music. The actual surfing music is a good surfing vibe, but the title screen music has like this indie rock kind of mellow vibe that I really like. And I do like how different the two songs are. Maybe there's, I don't know, can you beat the game? Is there like Indian music too? Is there credit roll music?
I can't imagine being able to beat the game. It seems like you just keep shooting for higher and higher scores. Like there are people on the global leaderboard that far surpass me, into the millions, and I'm not even half that. It's unbelievable. So I'm trying to figure out how they're getting that high. Like I understand that there's a multiplier system here with the combos, but even then, man, it's hard to imagine getting that high. Not that I won't try, but
well, you mentioned something to us, I guess small spoiler for what happens with the wave the further you get.
Yeah. So assuming you continue riding, you cannot continue forever. There is a finite amount of wave, just like in real life. The wave dissipates the further away from the curl you get. So it continues for quite some time. I'd say maybe, I don't know, 60, 90 seconds, something like that. But if you continue riding and riding and riding left, eventually the top of the wave starts to diminish and come down. So if you try to shoot a trick off the top, you're going to have less of a landing surface. You know how you have like X height, or I guess it would be Y height to land on that wave and sort of pull back up again so you don't run into the bottom. Well, that starts to get lower and lower, and eventually you just cannot land anything. So there is a finite round, even if you are good enough to keep going. So even if you keep going, then the game can last probably max like 3 minutes, I would imagine. It's a nice short game.
I kind of like that. Score as much as you can within this time limit. I like that speed run aspect. Of course, I'm terrible, so it's easy for me to say.
Right. Me too.
Is there any final thoughts before we get to the second game?
Yes, I want to talk about artwork.
Oh, yeah, go for it. The artist wants to talk art?
Just a little bit. There are some things that I super love about this. So, this is very like Game Boy, LCD, pixel type related artwork. And I think it's so interesting that the surfer is sort of mapped out in this. It looks like it's maybe like a 3-dimensional model that gets moved around because there's so many different positions it can achieve and that you can see it from. And I'm so used to playing, sprite games where there's only a pretty limited number of animated cells that pop up that you can see. So I thought that was really interesting. I also like how the surfboard artwork changes each round you do. Like sometimes it says Chuhai Labs and sometimes there's some sort of design on it, but it's like this little Easter egg they threw in for, like you're grabbing a different board each time. And the other thing that I super love is the edge of the wave, the curl. There's like these, you can tell they're, what do you call it? Instances of a particular piece of artwork, but basically where the wave starts curling and sort of falling down as you would go inside the tube, there's these like lovely cascading instances of the water coming off that just look so incredible. And it even cast this amazing shadow on the back of the wave. And I think it's so interesting because they're only working with pixels that are on or off. So it doesn't like change to another shade of gray. It's like it reinterpolates a different pattern of off and on dots that make it look like there's this nice bit of dimension to it. So I wanted to give props to whoever's doing the artwork at Chuhai Labs, I thought you did a really amazing job. And I also have another couple of things I wanted to touch on before we move on, if you'll let me.
Sure.
Did you guys have anything you wanted to add to the art section?
No.
In general, the dithering support that I've seen on the Playdate is really exceptional. For a 2D sprite-based device primarily. That's what's providing that shadow effect and kind of that stippled look.
Yeah, I might give you an actually on that one.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I hate to be that guy, but it looks like a lot of pattern dithering, which is like an easier way to remember dithering. And I wish there were more like noise dithering or random dithering so that you couldn't quite see the banding that was going on between the levels of gradient that they're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
But that's a small minor nitpick. So anyway, the other couple things I wanted to mention is that there are a couple of animals in this game. Have you guys seen them?
No.
I don't think so, no.
Oh, I have seen a fish.
A shark?
Maybe it was a shark.
Was there a fin sticking out of the water and it was
there
black?
Was something. I wasn't paying much attention to it.
Okay, so another one of the instructions will alert you to the shark, which I believe if you run into, it'll wipe you out. I haven't hit it yet, but I want to try that at some point. Have you? What's it do?
Well, I died, but I mean, that's not unusual. So.
Okay. You don't die in any unusual way, huh?
Not that I noticed.
Okay. And the second animal, which is also referenced in one of the tips at the end of the games, is the bird. And the instruction says, try to touch the bird. And for a long time, I was like, what bird? Where is the bird? And so when you're really catching some air and you're up in the sky, occasionally you will see a bird. And if you time your jumps in a very lucky way, because it's not like you can see the bird before you jump to really aim for it. Occasionally you can, I'm trying to remember what the instruction says. It's like give the bird a high five or something. But basically if you touch the bird, I believe that there's some extra points associated with it. Usually when I'm that high in the air and cranking the thing so fast, I'm, so hopped up on adrenaline, I can't see what my score is doing, but I think that it gives you some sort of reward for high-fiving the bird. But anyway, those are the last couple things I wanted to mention about it that I thought were fun little Easter eggs.
I did see that tip. I think it does say high five the bird, something to that effect.
Yeah.
I want to see the shark though now.
All this,
down at the bottom, near the bottom of the wave.
That's where I hang out.
Scattered on the rocks.
Mm-hmm. All this bird talk, though, has me excited to talk about a different game.
I like that transition.
Yeah,
nice work, Nick.
Thank you. The second game is Casual Birder. And Don, do you know who the developer was for this one?
Oh, I had that pulled up, but I don't have it right now. Let me hop back over there. His name is Diego Garcia.Maxo.
That's it. Okay.
And I looked up, I had his Twitter up here. Let me see if I can find it again. He had worked
on music and
sound
sound by Max Coburn.
Okay. I looked up Diego's Twitter account. I didn't find like a website for him, but he worked on a game called Damaged in Transit and a game called Dear Reader, which I used to talk about on Gaming on 10, which was a really cool Apple Arcade game for iOS devices. Anyway, tell us more about Casual Birder.
Casual Birder is like a mix of a Pokemon style light RPG / adventure game with Pokemon Snap, where you're taking pictures. So it's all the Pokemons mixed together, but without the combat aspect. So it functions sort of similarly to a point-and-click adventure, and for those who know me, I try to conflate everything with point-and-click adventure games, so this will not be any surprise. But you start off in a town, and you're called a casual birder by some local tough bird watching gang. So you have to prove yourself, sort of, by wandering around and taking pictures of birds. But one of my favorite aspects of this game is the names that they give to the birds. So as you as you take pictures of the birds in the game, it will give you little bird facts about them, but they're totally wrong or made up. It's hilarious, and it's a lot of fun. There's something like 26 different birds that you can take pictures of within the game. You can complete the game without taking photos of all 26, but there's usually a fun little reward, like I mentioned, for taking photos of the birds. So I really enjoyed this game. Of the two, this was my preferred go-to over the past week.
Yeah, I found that I'm not smart enough to get too far on this. This was definitely a Nick game. Point and click seemed to be a good combination because it seems like while you are taking pictures of birds, that's only a small section of it. Whereas Pokemon Snap, the main focus is snapping pictures of the Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
This was more like you're getting combinations of pictures, and collecting the pictures was sort of like collecting items in a point and click. And then it's what you do with those pictures that kind of unlocks new dialogue and new story and new options in the game. And I found some of those combinations difficult to put together.
There are also items to pick up and allow you to interact with different people or birds in different ways. So there's a lot more going on than there seems at first.
So Ryan? Can I just take a second to say that this has got to be the best theme of a video game I have ever heard of in my life. It is so quirky and fantastic, and the execution does not disappoint. I mean, there's so many fun, silly lines of dialogue and description that just totally bring this game to life. I mean, in addition to the names of the birds Nick was talking about, like I took a picture with a bird at one point and it labeled it selfie with strutting junk bird. And of course it's a pigeon.
Right.
Oh, and I love the fact that there's a rival birding gang. I mean, Diego, chef's kiss. This is incredible. I mean, I think they launched with two very, very strong games. I really fancied both of them. And while I have not progressed very far in casual birder, I think Nick is to casual birder what Ryan is to whitewater wipeout. Like Nick's had his way with this game, and I can't wait to continue on further in it.
So Don, how far did you get into this game?
I felt like I was stuck for a long time, and there was just a real easy path that I didn't notice. And so I recently found that path, which unlocked a lot more area. There's a lot more to the initial starting area than I realized. There's basically two pillars you can walk between that I just ignored.
I missed the same thing for a long time.
That leads to a mountain and a beach and all kinds of different areas.
Oh.
So I think a mistake I made the coffee shop owner really upset, and I can't go back in there. But I think I need the item from the coffee shop, and I don't know if I'm like stuck now or.
Would you like a hint?
Maybe off air so we don't spoil it.
Good idea. Okay.
But I think the coffee cup is the key to getting further in the game.
Well,
possibly getting that cup filled with coffee, I think has something to do with something. I can get worms, and I can get a popsicle made out of butter. But looking at one of the pictures on the official Playdate site, it looks like you can carry 6 items at once. I have only ever had.
You can carry a ton of stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
There are items all over the place.
Okay, cool.
And the use of the crank in the game, there's a few different uses that it has, but one of them is cycling between items in your inventory, which really messes you up if you swap between different games and go back to it later if you forget the use of the crank to do that. There was a while, probably the second or third time that I played it, where I couldn't figure out how to change items. And I didn't notice the inventory in the upper left.
That
So
really took me a while to figure
yeah,
out. I saw those things up there, and I could not for the life of me figure out what to do
what
with
is
them.
that?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, maybe this crank that's built in. Maybe I should try that.
Which brings up a question I had. Maybe you guys know: is there like an official instruction booklet for any of these games, or are they just assuming they're easy enough that you're gonna figure it out at some point?
I don't think there's an instruction book. There was talk in the Discord on like it would be nice if when the games launched there was some basic instructions that kind of came
Yeah,
with them on the site.
even just
But
a little PDF or something you could download if you wanted to.
yeah, even on the wiki, Whitewater Wipeout's the only one that even has any information. So just people got to add stuff.
Yeah, and that's an interesting kind of divergence from like itch.io, one of the storefronts that sells Playdate games. A lot of those games do have control information built into the storefront, so you can read a description of the game as well as how to control it. So that's interesting. That might be something that comes with time. We'll have to see.
So just as an odd parallel, I started playing Final Fantasy on the Game Boy, and there's a number of different mechanics in there. And so I looked up the instruction booklet, which to my surprise is like 80 pages long. And so I started reading through it, and I thought I kind of had a handle on it, but there were definitely a number of things in the instruction booklet that I hadn't figured out yet, and it was really great to have that. The print nerd in me wants to go buy an 80-page Game Boy instruction booklet now. but yeah, it just got me thinking, man, it would be really nice to have some sort of documentation, even if only in digital form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it might happen one day. But well, you mentioned the humor of the game and some of the fun of taking pictures. One thing that we kind of mentioned but breezed over a bit is that each picture that you take is labeled within your group of photos. If you imagine like a pile of 10 different Polaroids, that's basically what you have to sort through. And you can take some and immortalize them in this book of birds.
Haven't got there yet.
Oh, you have it starting out. It's one of the options when you go and look at your photos is put it in a photo book.
It's like a diary. It's called a diary, I think.
Yeah. I think that's it.
Okay.
And so what you're supposed to do is take a photo of each bird and then put it in this diary. And so you have kind of one photo of each, but it labels each of them in an interesting way. And the crank is also used to focus your camera, which is interesting because you are taking photos with a cell phone. Normally not something that requires manual focus, but it's an interesting mechanic, and especially there are different birds with different characteristics, like some move faster than others, or some might only be visible at certain times while you're playing. So it requires different uses of that mechanic with the crank, which is pretty cool.
Well, can I ask, with the birds that move faster, are you supposed to just be really fast on the trigger sometimes?
Well, would you like an answer to that?
Yeah, well, there's one bird that like is real fast, and I think maybe I could kind of catch it, but there's a lot of me waiting and just missing it a bunch. So I assume there's something to help with that.
The answer is you're wrong. You can't do it.
Okay, that's helpful. I'll stop wasting my time.
Come back to it later. It'll become apparent.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, maybe I'm missing something.
That's the other nice thing about this game. I will say that some of the solutions to puzzles are not super intuitive. It does require a bit of thinking. I really love point and click games, and so that's something that I pay a lot of attention to is the design of the puzzles. and whether or not it's something that I can kind of breeze through and this all makes perfect sense, or if it's something where it takes a lot of thinking, or if it's something where I can go to a different screen, solve a different puzzle, come back, and then I'll have a solution. This is kind of the last iteration there, where usually if there's something I can't figure out in it, I'll just go and try to solve a different puzzle. And thankfully, there's about 26 of them, so there's a lot of different stuff that you can do, even if it seems like you're totally stuck at the moment.
So are you labeling each bird a puzzle?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there's interactions with NPCs. Those are all puzzles too. So there's more than 26 total, but yeah.
That's interesting. Okay.
There's only a few environmental puzzles, like traversing an environment, but there's a couple of those too. Those are less difficult, which is good. There's not any mazes that are there just to increase the length of the game.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
The first week I was a little gun shy because people were reporting a lot of crash reports.
Mm-hmm.
But he did push a patch to the game pretty quick that I think took care of a lot of those.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have not had any crashes in any of the official games yet.
I have had a lot of crashes on mine. I've mainly been playing Whitewater Wipeout. I keep forgetting that name. And I'll usually have like 3, 4, 5, 6 sometimes per day. It depends. It's almost like when it starts to crash, it'll continue crashing a few times within a relatively short period of time. But then once it gets it out of its system, then it's kind of stable again. It's very strange. It would be more of a bummer if the reset was not so efficient. So I like that even when it crashes, it's like, uh-oh, press A. Okay, here you are again. Just, start it up. It's very fast. So I appreciate that about the crash, if there is anything to appreciate about a crash.
No, that's a good thing.
Have you taken any steps to reset your Playdate or?
No, I do not know how to do that.
There's a reset in the settings, or there's another reset underneath the crank in the little slot. There's a hole, and you can put a paperclip in there. And then finally, there's a factory reset, which you probably don't want to do. That'll delete your scores and whatnot, but you can do the paperclip one safely.
Huh. Okay. Interesting. I see that in the crank slot now. Very cool.
And I think I noticed there was a number in the crank slot. I don't know if that's a serial number, so maybe we can compare numbers afterwards. I think that might be.
I've never noticed that.
I didn't notice it till last night when I needed the paperclip. So, one thing I wanted to mention about Casual Birder is I love the art style, and I found myself kind of more drawn to that game because I wanted to look at this and that. There are some areas where the screen is larger than a Game Boy screen, despite what people remember. But it is still small, and some of the detail is so fine that I'm wondering if there's more going on in this corner or that corner. But in my experience so far, anyway, there isn't stuff hiding in the corners. But maybe I need to dig deeper, is what Nick will tell me after the show. But some of the text is real small. And I noticed the past year, I finally hit that point where I used to make fun of my dad, where he had to start holding stuff further away from his face to read it. And that's me. I have to start holding stuff further away to read it in my 40s. And so, not ideal. I wish some of the text was a little bit larger, or there was a way to scale it up, but...
Yeah, speaking of the artwork, while I also appreciate it and think that it's very fun and I want to look at it too, I think that there is sort of a nascent beginner artist approach to the art in Playdate, because it's almost like they're using single pixel lines everywhere. And I really want to see artists start using like thicker outlines on the characters and thinner interior details, so you can really start like uniting a subject and understanding it as a whole, rather than like everything is this super, super, super thin line. When it was Game Boy resolution, it didn't really matter because those dots were so thick. But now that you have this really high resolution, man, those lines get real, real thin. And I look forward to artists using multiple thicknesses of line in future games.
Yeah, especially in a 1 pixel font family.
Right.
It's coming, Ryan. It's coming. Have you seen Waste Braver, for example?
Is that a Playdate game?
It's a Playdate game. It's an indie. But I'll show you some. I'll send you some links or post them in the show notes. There's some pretty advanced stuff that'll be coming eventually.
Cool.
And this is no knock on Casual Birder. I feel like if this game was on Xbox, it would look the same. I feel like this is an aesthetic choice, and I like it for what it is. But I do appreciate what you're saying.
Yeah, and
a lot of the games that are out right now are so really fine detailed.
Yeah. And like I said, I do not want to knock Casual Birder either. I think it is a brilliantly themed and executed game, and I can't wait to get further into it.
Well, speaking of, is there anything else we want to say about this? We wanted to talk about a couple indies, but we went real long on Whitewater, which is fine.
Sorry about that.
Well, why don't we jump into ranking the season 1 games?
That's a great idea. We would like to keep a running tally of our season 1 games, so each week we will slot them in here. So there's only 2, so there's not a whole lot we can do this week. But I would like to slot my number 1 game as Casual Birder.
I would like to do the same, Don.
That leaves Whitewater in the number 2 slot.
Yeah.
And Ryan, you don't get a choice. Unless you want to come back every week.
I figured that was probably the case.
The seat's always warm for you, Ryan.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing your commentary moving forward, and maybe rejoining you at some point.
I assume your picks would be opposite.
This is so difficult because it's such an apples and oranges situation. They're so wildly different from one another. I love Whitewater whatever because of the quick and easy gameplay that I can just sit down for a minute or two literally and get a quick game in. But Casual Birder, it's got that nice RPG feel to it that has like a little longer legs to it. I don't know. I have certainly been playing more Whitewater Wipeout. But I'd probably give that one the edge for me personally. But once I get into Casual Birder, I might swing your way.
Lists.
Look forward to hearing it.
Yeah. I like that they are so different. They're good picks.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So indie games of the week. There's lots of games on itch. There's a couple dozen now. And hopefully those just keep rolling up and piling up. So Nick and I both picked a game to highlight. The game I chose is called Yoshimi Yahtzee.
Tell me about Yoshimi Yahtzee.
So on itch.io, that came out so fast I blew right past it. Itch.io, you can pick up Yoshimi Yahtzee. You name your own price, so it could be free, it could be $10, whatever you want to do. It's just a real simple Yahtzee game, but really polished. I love the Yoshimi logo. He or they, I'm not sure who Yoshimi is, but they are on the Discord. They just have these real simple, straightforward games that just do what they need to do. And I loved having one of those handheld LCD Yahtzee games. I used to visit my wife's grandparents, and they lived in rural Ohio, and there was nothing to do. And we'd sit on the porch for hours, and they have these little battery-powered Yahtzee games, and I would just play that all week, basically. And this basically replicates that. So, real simple, perfect gameplay.
You're taking me back, Don. I had one of those travel Yahtzee sets where you could like roll the dice around inside this plastic housing, and if you wanted to keep whatever you got, you like thumped this little thing up on the bottom, which kept it in place. What a cool game. So as somebody who is technologically inept, how do I go about downloading a game that does not appear on my Playdate automatically?
Dude, it's so
Ryan,
easy.
It's incredible what they came up with for this, because there are multiple ways to load games on there. If you're developing a game through either their SDK or their Pulp, kind of Mario Paint-esque system, you can plug your Playdate up via USB and then load it up that way. Or they offer this really awesome Wi-Fi side loading capability where you download a zip file and then you upload it to your Playdate account. So you go to play.date, sign in, and there's a link to sideload, and it attaches to the system that is linked to your account, and then it will show up just like an official Playdate game in the list after a period of time automatically.
Very cool.
Or you can trigger an instant download to your Playdate in the system menu. But it's really slick, and I'm just incredibly impressed with that, and the fact that it is so open for things like that. Pretty neat. So itch.io is at the moment the premier marketplace for third-party developed Playdate games. And there's a variety of different pricing structures, and each game can set their own. Some are free. Some, as Don mentioned with Yoshimi Yahtzee, are pay what you will. And then the game that I would like to talk about, which is Bloom. I'm still in the midst of playing this game. I haven't finished it yet, but it is a beautiful, wonderful game. It is perhaps my favorite Playdate game so far that I've played. This appeals to the pleasure centers in Nick's brain directly.
That sounds about right.
Hit those just right. But essentially, you are a college dropout, apparently, who decided to start a flower shop, and you're doing it in a space that you rent, like an apartment. So you have rooftop access, and you're starting a garden and essentially taking the proceeds from that and selling them, and repeat ad infinitum. So it's a bit of a farming sim, like think Animal Crossing or Harvest Moon, but very, very light mechanics. There's planting, there's watering, and there's digging. But there is so much game outside of that. There's a whole social simulation aspect that's based on the real-time clock in your game, very loosely based. It's not. It is not Animal Crossing, where certain things only happen at 7 a.m. or whatever. It will allow you to put it down and pick it up later on, and then those events will be stacked up. And the mechanic that it uses for that is text messages. So all of the social simulation stuff is like text messages, which are in your phone that you can access at any time. And the conversations and misspellings and other choices that you make are just perfect. It's incredible the way this is written. I've really, really enjoyed playing around with it. And if you think that's all, there's more. There's your cell phone has the ability to check the weather, and that is based on the weather in your location. So if it's raining outside, it's raining in the game, and that
Are you
impacts.
Serious?
Yes,
Wow.
And that impacts how your stuff grows.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, sorry.
I live in a desert. You
Visit,
said
Don.
like stuff grows faster when it rains. I was like, what? What are you talking about? Rains?
Yeah,
What do you mean?
basically you don't have to water it. So it only shaves off a little bit of interaction there. Don't worry about it too much. It is supposed to rain all week, though, this week, Don, so you could always come visit. So your cell phone also has an Asteroids game, which is Don's favorite classic arcade game.
That's what brought up the conversation.
I wondered about that. So that's been really fun, and there's a person who will text you as you start improving your score, and they try to like mansplain how to do better, and it's pretty funny. So yeah, there's a whole just there are layers and layers of interaction here. Like
Gotcha
between
mechanic.
your parents, there's a gotcha mechanic. Once a day, you can open up this gotcha machine and then crank, and it will spit out something random. There's 30 different items. The game is meant to be played over a 1 month period, so that's why there's 30 items. Each day you can crank a new one. Very, just extremely impressive and such a large scale of a game. So this game is $9.99 on itch.io. It is the most expensive game with a fixed price on itch.io currently. But I will say it is well worth the price if you like this kind of game. If you don't, if this sounds like a slow moving kind of thing, it might not be for you, but I will say it is right up my alley, and I would encourage anybody with a spare $9.99 to give it a try.
It feels like a big boy game. I mean, it feels like a full-fledged game. $10 doesn't. It feels well worth $10.
I agree.
Yeah.
And it's got a lo-fi hip hop soundtrack, which is excellent.
Yeah.
Might you say chill hop?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very good.
My only knock is that you can't use your phone on the roof, can you?
No, but I mean,
you gotta go back down. You gotta use the crank, I guess. You gotta crank yourself back down to your apartment to take your phone out.
You crank the elevator manually.
No, yeah.
To get up to the roof.
Yeah. I'm like, once I dig out my plants, I want to buy some seeds. I'm like, I gotta go back downstairs to order some more seeds.
Yeah. But then there might be interactions with your parents, telling you that you're not doing things correctly in your life.
Typo riddled text from my parents.
Yeah.
It's a very cool game. Well worth
aggressivity. Yeah.
Yes.
It's great.
Good launch game.
Mm-hmm. So that's definitely my indie of the week.
You went for the big guns right away.
Yeah, well, it's the one I've been spending a lot of time with, the most time. So it's been a lot of fun.
I do like the texting means you can just like real life. If somebody texts you and you don't want to read it, you just kind of leave them on read and I'll come back to it later. It has a save game feature in the menu, which I'd like to see. I guess I don't have a problem with Casual Birder. It seems to save wherever I want anyway.
This saves automatically as well for the most part.
Okay.
I've never had a situation. There's been a few times where I've forgotten to hit the save and it hasn't. It's brought me right back to where I was. So.
Oh, okay, cool.
I think that's just a fail-safe.
Nice.
Or maybe a feel-good. I'm not sure.
Cool. Good pick.
Yeah.
Well, that's our week, I think.
I believe so. Yeah.
I think our regular routine, maybe we would talk news first and not have a special guest, so we wouldn't have a professional surfer on board to go deep on a game. But we were really happy to have you, Ryan, this week. Thank you so much for teaching us the ways of the Whitewater Wipeout.
I am glad to be your native Californian who has never surfed in his life, and this has been a pleasure as always. I hope I can bother you guys again at some point.
I hope so too.
Thanks for artistically carving those waves.
Well,
great show, guys. I can't wait to hear more from you.
I've had a lot more fun with Whitewater since Ryan stepped in. And
Definitely. So we appreciate you very much, and thanks for joining us on this first episode.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll have some Casual Birder questions for you before too long.
Please do. I would love nothing more than to talk Casual Birder tips all day long. So.
Listeners, thank you for joining us. You're welcome to email us, helloplaydatepodcast@gmail.com. You can get us on Twitter, HelloPDPodcast, Instagram, HelloPlaydate, website, playdatepodcast.com. There'll be a link to our Discord in the show notes. And I'll leave out the bingo tip line for now, right? That's a little deep into the weeds, right?
That's advanced Hello Playdate. Yeah.
Yes. But we'll have all of those links I just mentioned, all of our socials in the show notes. So please join us, and we would love to hear more from the Playdate community as we start this adventure. So thank you for joining us.
Best of luck, guys.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.